Hello, all. Garland Nixon here, and the Kremlin is confirming that they've received the amended peace plan and that they're going to meet with the U.S. delegation next week. Let's talk about this and other items in the news. Hello, Garland Nixon. What the heck is in my eye? Garland Nixon here. And let's see what's happening in the news. We got big things going on. We've got this peace plan, right? But we can talk about that. Let's start off with the Kremlin's acknowledgement. What the heck is going on with my eye? It was perfect. I don't know, the dust or something got in it. Probably just a eyelash or something. Anyway, let's go. Kremlin confirms it has received the amended Ukraine peace plan. This is Russian news. Let's see. Russia has received the main parameters of the revised Ukraine police plan. You notice they name it revised. And why do they say revised? Apparently, for those who didn't know, apparently when they met in Alaska, they sat down and the Russians said, look, we can talk Turkey here, but we got some red lines. And they're not even red lines. What are they really? What are we talking about? In somewhere around, I think, December 17th, 18th, 19th, right in there, December 2021, before the special military operation started, the Russians submitted a written document to the West, and in particular to the United States. And they said back then, we ain't talking to the puppets, we're talking to the puppeteers, right? U.S., we want a written reply to this. And they made a list of things, and the Blinken-Sullivan administration said this is not even a starting point. And NATO said, whatever his name is, Stubbleberg, Stutenberg, whatever the guy's name is, then said that Russia does not get a say. And Russia said, well, we shall see about that. Right. As the old saying goes, the enemy gets a vote, right? You're in a war, the enemy gets a vote. And the bottom line was this. I can interpret it this way. The Russians said, we would like to resolve this in a diplomatic connection and an intellectual manner. And NATO said, no, the only way to resolve this is militarily. It's a kinetic manner. And the Russians said, if we got to do that, we will. We prefer not to, but okay. Earlier this month, the U.S. put forward a peace proposal in the Ukraine conflict. So they're saying revise in that it's clear what the Russians are saying is we came up with a deal. We said we can accept probably this. We can work from this. Let's talk about this. And you changed it. So it's a revised plan. So we now have to look at it because this ain't what we said. And we are not in a mood to make adjustments. And that's okay with us. We prefer not to. But if we got to settle it kinetically, we told you from the very beginning when you said if we got to settle this on the battlefield, we said if that's what we got to do, we will. It's your choice. According to leaked versions, the plan requires Kiev to abandon its NATO ambitions, drop its territorial claim, cap its army at 600,000. Kiev and its EU and UK backers demanded a redraft, which they reportedly worked on during a meeting with the U.S. negotiation. And see, this is what the Russians say. Remember, this is Russian media. The revised version reportedly removed or amended these key issues. So the Russian media is simply saying exactly what I said. We had a deal. We told you what we could work with. We leaned in some areas maybe we may not have wanted to lean into. But of course, let me just say this. There are those who may say the Russians shouldn't give up anything. The Russians are reasonable. They're diplomats and they understand in diplomacy. You say, well, if you give us this, we'll give you that. We'll look at it and we'll see. So that's professional diplomacy, right? But now you've gone back and did what they've done every time. Every single time, what has NATO and the West done? They negotiate amongst themselves. Yes, what do you think we can live with? Well, we can live with if the Russians surrender, give us everything we want, and pretend as though they lost even though they won. Okay, great, let's write up a document. The Russians sign an unconditional surrender. Does everybody agree with that? Yes. Everybody agrees that this can end if the Russians sign an unconditional surrender. Great, let's present it to the Russians. And then we'll say to the Russians, if you don't take this, we're going to hit you with more sanctions. And the Russians are like, yeah, okay, guys, thanks. Have a nice day. We got business to take care of here in the Kharkov Oblast. with Fab 3000 missiles. That's what they're doing. They just keep doing what they're doing. Okay. Peskov said on Friday that Moscow has received the new version, but will not comment publicly on the details. Well, isn't that so different from the U.S.? The U.S. is like, yes, we've got this. And then, there's 50 million stories in the Telegraph and in the New York Post and in the Kiev Post and the Finns Post, every other post. And the Russians get it. They're like, all right, we're going to look at it. We'll get back to you. Once the Russians take it in, they look at it. Their diplomats look at it and they say, this is where we are with this. We already know. The Russians have said very consistently, these are the things that we require to end the conflict. We tried to tell you at the beginning, but you wouldn't listen. We could have avoided the conflict, but they still are here. So it's like the Russians are like, here we go. These are our parameters. Okay, will you take this? No. It's like I'm selling a used car. I'll take $10,000 for the used car. All right, will you take 8? No. I'll tell you, how about 7? No. How about 4? You're going in the wrong direction. I got an idea. 3? No. Okay, then we'll go back to 8. And we'll give you free lunch at I don't know, a local cafe. No, we said 10, nothing less. Okay, lunch and dinner at a local cafe. No, and that's all they're to keep doing, right? It's just crap. Let's continue. The main parameters have been. This is what the Russians say. The main parameters have been communicated. A discussion will take place in Moscow next week. Witkoff will visit the Russian capital in the coming days to discuss the plan. So that's cool. It sounds like Witkoff's going to come in. There's going to be a pre-discussion. They're going to talk with Witkoff and say, man, come on, you got to be kidding me. I thought we told you what we take, but okay, let's talk. And then next week, a group of Americans will come in, and then the Russians will say probably to them, guys, the Ukraine, the EU ain't going to take this anyway. B, if Zelensky signs off on it, they'll hang him, and the Nazis will hang him, and then everybody will know that he's not in charge of the country. So how can we do this? But the Russians will say, yeah, yay or nay. We'll take this. We won't take that. Whatever. What all the Russians will do is say, hold on a second. Hey, Dmitry. Yeah. Remember that document that we gave to the Americans back in December of 2021? You hit it to me again. Thanks. All right. Blow the dust off of it. Oh, what were you saying, Americans? Here's our freaking demands. We told you back then, for God's sake, 4 years ago. What are we talking about? What are we doing here? Blow the dust off this and read it. Every single time we fax you the same document, and for some reason you think things are going to change. Well, they ain't. That's where the Russians are. If you're going to do what you're going to do, it's like if somebody threatens me, Garland, either you do this or I'm going to kick your butt. And I say, okay, you got to kick my butt. I ain't doing it. All right, well, darn it, you better. Look, if you're going to kick my butt, you got to kick my butt. I've already told you I ain't going to do it. Whatever you have to do, you got to do. There's no point in discussing it. That's where we are, right? All right. Ask whether certain countries in the UN will be called on to recognize decisions on a settlement. Pesky said this will be determined in further talks. So they're trying to get ahead of things. Well, are you going to ask the other people to recognize? And you know what that's about? What that is about is they're saying, are you going to demand that the EU recognizes Crimea and the new regions? And the Russians are saying, let's don't get ahead of ourselves. You're asking me these questions so I can answer them, and you can run back to the EU and throw a monkey wrench in things. If I answer them, you're going to take that answer and write 10 stories in the Telegraph from it. We ain't getting ahead of ourselves. Everybody knows that game. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves and hold discussions in such a public megaphone format. We believe this is inappropriate, he said. Moscow welcomed the initial U.S. plan, saying its framework could form the basis for a final settlement. It has accused Kiev's European backers of undermining peace efforts and distorting the proposal for their own agenda. Listen to this. President Putin said that the main obstacle to progress is a clash of conflicting views within the West over how to end the fighting, right? So isn't that what I've said all along? People said, what do you think about Trump's peace? I said, look, you can denigrate it. You can say Trump is untrustworthy. You can attack Trump in any way you want to. And a lot of the things I may agree with, whatever. It doesn't matter whether I agree with them or not. There are things that I could say about Trump, and I'm like, yeah, that's not in the best interest of the U.S., or maybe he's not a good statesman in this area or that area, right? Certainly, that's irrelevant. Here's all I have to say. Trump wants to get out, and I hope that there's a way to do that. I don't really necessarily believe there is, but maybe I could be pleasantly surprised. All I'm saying is this: Trump and or whoever wants to get a heck out of Ukraine in the United States in the Trump administration, for whatever reason, their fight ain't with the Russians. The Russians have already said, we'll make a deal tomorrow. We've already told you the parameters of the deal. It's like me selling the used car and the guy's trying to get me down to 6, 7, 3,000, 8,000. I want that car. And I say, dude, I told you I'll take 10,000 for the car. We don't have to beat around the bush here. This is easy. You want the car? 10 grand. You don't want the car. I don't care about that. We don't have to argue about other things. I've given you my price. If you want the car, all you got to do is say that's too high. The car's got a little too much mileage. I won't pay for that. I'll say maybe somebody else will give me that money. Thanks. Have a nice day. Or I'll keep it. So the Russians are there. Dudes, we tried to tell you what we want. We don't have to do this. Right? Now, there's some other things that I think should be taken into account here. Let's touch base with a couple of other things that I think we should, things that are going on around this. Right? Here's one. Putin meets with Hungarian Prime Minister in Moscow, right? Let's talk about that story right there. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has arrived in Moscow. Orban said the purpose of his talks, listen to this, the purpose of his talks with the Russian president was to ensure the continued supply of energy to Hungary, specifically to maintain the flow of Russian gas and oil through pipelines. A couple of things. Orban also said other countries in the area, excuse me, we're yawning. Okay, so the Trump team have said, the Trump people have said, okay, look, Orban, you can get gas and oil, whatever you need through Russia, right? But what Orban then said afterwards was, look, however you choose to do this, I'm going to share it with other countries on my border. We got other countries on my border that also needs this. The Ukrainians are trying to stop them. I'll be kind of a hub. So when the gas and oil comes in here, these other countries that need it in the region, I'll share it with them, right? So I think that's part of the discussion, how much he needs, how much he can get, what the current pipelines, things like that will do, and how that he can share with other countries. Additionally, do not underestimate the possibility that Orban is doing some preliminary work for Trump. Orban and Trump are very, very tight, and they talk. And it wouldn't shock me if prior to this going in, that Orban's going in doing some feelers, right? Come on. Just a week before this, Witkoff is going to be there, and Orban just happens to show up in Moscow. I think that Trump and Orban, or the Trump people and the Orban people, have been talking, and that Orban's going in there with some preliminary stuff also, so he can find out, kind of under the table what's happening. And he can go back to the Trump people and say, well, I talked to Putin. He said, he'll take this. He won't take this. This is what he knows. This is what he thinks. So I think Orban's doing some upfront diplomatic work that has happened before with Orban. And it's not new. I mean, look, JFK did those kinds of things with the Russians in the early 60s. So I think that Orban is involved in diplomatic discussions in some way, shape, or form. I think I'm pretty sure of that, because there's a lot of things going on right now, and it's just timing. Look, what does he need to talk to the Russians about gas and oil from? He was already getting gas and oil from the Russians, and it hasn't stopped. And what happened was, in case you don't know it, there was some sanctions or something that said that nobody could buy it, or they were going to sanction people who got it. And then Orban said, hey man, I want to be able to do it. And Trump said, go right ahead. So that's all cleared. So why is he in Russia? Possibly to talk about being a hub, but I think more likely he's doing some upfront work, and he's going to pass some words back and forth that maybe you want to be outside of the normal diplomatic conversation. That's going to be my guess. Let's touch base. Let's touch on a few other things that I think are important. Here's another one. TASS is reporting China's now. Okay, next week, the Americans are going to be in Moscow, right? China's top diplomat to visit Russia early next week, right? At the upcoming 20th round of Russian-Chinese strategic security consultations, at the upcoming 20th round of Russian-Chinese strategic security consultations, the two sides will exchange opinions on regional and global strategic affairs of mutual interest. Clearly, the Wang Yi, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, will travel to Russia for bilateral consultations on strategic security on December 1st and 2nd. Listen to this. At the invitation of the Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu, Wang Yi, a member of the Chinese Communist Party Politburo, director of the Office of Central Affairs Commission, will visit Russia Monday and Tuesday to take part in the 20th round of Russian-Chinese strategic security consultations. So what it sounds like to me is this: the U.S. is going to talk to Witkoff over the weekend. They're talking to, again, this makes it even more important that they're talking, the U.S., the Russians. The Kremlin's going to talk to Orban about what's happening in Europe and who knows what else. They're going to talk to China about what's going on between Russia and China, maybe Japan, maybe other things, maybe the potential for agreements, how China could be involved. And what will happen if there is no agreements. So clearly the Russians and the Chinese will be talking first. So what we're going to see is the American meeting will be sandwiched by Russian and Chinese meetings. The Russians and Chinese will meet. So the Russians will meet with Witkoff, Orban. Then the Chinese come in on Monday. The Russians will meet with the Chinese. Then the Russians will meet with the Americans about Ukraine. It seems obvious at this point that these things are all interconnected, right? That the Russians and Chinese will be strategically working together. Because what are they talking about? Russian-Chinese strategic security consultations. It's pretty clear what's going on here. The two sides will exchange opinions on regional, that would be what's happening here, and what's happening with Japan and what's happening with Taiwan, and global strategic affairs of mutual interest. That would be probably what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in Iran, right? Clearly. So there you go. They're going to be talking, continuing concerning the two countries' strategic security, according to the Chinese diplomats. So those are all things are together, from Orban to Witkoff to Wang Yi. All these things are coming together right now. Now, let me go with something else that I think is important. This is directly, all these things are related. Woo! Ukrainian President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak resigns after home raided by anti-corruption officials, right? The Ukrainian president chief of staff, Yermak, who was also part of Ukraine's peace deal negotiations with the U.S., has resigned after his home was raided in a major investigation into corruption. Two national agencies investigate $100 million, which is pennies, energy sector corruption scandal involving top Ukrainian officials in the country, said they had searched Yermak's office. Zelensky announced Yermak's resignation in the video, whether he said there didn't want to be any questions about Ukraine. There ain't no questions. I want there to be no rumors and speculation, right? Now, so what can we say? I think this is also directly related. I think that what we're seeing from the Trump administration, from the Trump people, from the those who are pushing for some kind of deal that's pressuring Zelensky. That's saying, Zelensky, we're getting close to you, brother. We're stepping right up to you. Can you hear the footsteps? There are footsteps behind you. The problem Zelensky has is the footsteps that he hears behind him are goose-stepping footsteps from these neo-Nazis in Ukraine who are saying, you sign anything, we kill you. Anything that has your signature on it will be considered a death warrant. If Zelensky signs anything, you might as well call it a suicide note. If Zelensky signs a document that says, okay, Trumpy, let's do this thing, consider it a suicide note, because the neo-Nazis have already said, we will do you in. At which point, need I get blisters on my tongue repeating the same thing over and over? If Zelensky signs something, the Nazis will say no. The members of parliament will say no. All of these well-armed militias that a neo-Nazi fascist will say no, and it will become obvious that the whole thing was a fraud, that Zelensky does not, nor has he ever represented Ukraine, and that he does not have the agency or the authority or the ability to sign a document on behalf of Ukraine and then to execute the parameters of that document that he signed. He just can't do it. The best he can do is flee to Israel. Well, with the rest of these guys, Yermak, Smermak, who the rest of them, the rest he can, Kolomoisky, the best that he can do is join his comrades and flee to Israel. That's what he's got to do. Somewhere in a document that they have, it has to say, and you will be allowed to flee to Israel, because that's the place that he's going to go eventually. That's where he's got to end up. If you remember, if you watch this at the very beginning, what did I say? At the end, it'll be just like Rafghani or Afghani, whatever his name is in Afghanistan. He will be running for the airport. The satchels of money will be falling out on the tarmac as he jumps on a plane and exercises the Samsonite action. He's out of there. At some point, the jig is going to be up. See, what's happening is, and I'll say this, while it appears that there is a negotiation for peace, while it appears that the Russians may soon win, and the what do you call it? The front lines are collapsing, and all of these things, as per a regular country, will create a dynamic where the Ukrainian government will have to say, give in, blah, blah, blah. It's something far different. What we're looking at is the approach of reality, right? Do you hear that, Mr. Anderson? That's the sound of inevitability, Mr. Anderson, right? The sound of that train coming. My name is Neo. But at any rate, so what we're looking at is inevitability. Inevitability is, at some point, the truth is that this was an MI6 scheme. The whole thing was an MI6 scheme, and that the US was nothing but the muscle. They were to provide, they were the guerrillas. The MI6 put this scheme together, the British Empire put this together, and the US was to provide the muscle. The French Foreign Legion was to provide the mercenaries. Let me, if you don't think France is run by the Brits, where did Macron work? Let me see something. Where did he work? Where did Macron work? Watch this. Here's a question about Macron. Did the British Empire run the Germans? What's this? How did Macron become an MD and a partner at Rothschild so quickly? His career trajectory is odd. He graduates from prestigious administration school in 2004, works as an inspector of finance for 4 years in the finance industry, then joined Rothschild in 2008 with no prior experience. He's an MD closing massive deals, right? Here's my point. Where did Macron work? Where did he come from? He came from the Rothschild Bank. He came from the Rothschild Empire. Macron does not have anything to do with France. He doesn't work for France. His job is to offer France up to the British crown. That's all. He came from Rothschild. Let's not be stupid. He's nothing but a Rothschild puppet. And his job is to say, well, whatever he's told by the British crown. That's it. That's reality. He worked for Goldman Sachs, but that's like saying he worked for Rothschild. It doesn't matter. So what we're looking at now is a situation where the whole reality could come out. And that is that this was nothing but an operation by the British crown to take out, this was the Crimean War again. They're going to use Ukraine to take out Russia, and they have suffered a catastrophic and cataclysmic worldwide defeat. And the Trump team, what's the word I'm looking for? Faction, are simply saying, yeah, how can we get out of this? And the Trump faction saying, and how can America kind of skate? You guys, you were behind, this is your thing. We were involved, but we're just a muscle. How can we get out of this? Things ain't looking good for Europe and for the British Empire. So maybe we'll walk away from this and we'll be okay. That's all it is. There's no honor amongst thieves. It's not that the Trump team are some kind of good guys or bad guys. There's no honor amongst thieves. These are empires, and the U.S. is like the British Empire is finally collapsing. Hey, we want ours. How can we get ours? Oh, there's Venezuela. Woo-hoo, they got money and oil. Let's take that, right? That's no honor amongst thieves. The U.S. is trying to get out from under it, not take the loss, and put the loss on the Europeans and walk away. And now the doggone Macron is afraid that it'll be revealed that he's nothing but a Rothschild empire puppet. And then it'll be revealed that Ukraine was not a real country, that it was run, that the Brits got in there, that they armed and warmed up the Nazis and set them up against Russia again, and they've suffered a catastrophic defeat again. They can't have all this happen. And the second Zelensky would put his name on a piece of paper, the second he does that, the next second, the Nazis in Ukraine say, we're not listening to you. The answer is no. Zelensky doesn't work for us. He doesn't represent us, and he's not the real. We're tired of this fiction that he's in charge of the country. He's not. And what in the name of heck happens in the West to the entire narrative? The entire narrative was based on Zelensky represents Ukraine. So the Europeans can never let that happen. They can't let that happen. All right. So I think that's one of the things that is being discussed between China and Russia. What do we have to deal with here? And I think China and Russia are like, look, let's see what happens. Are they going to go loony? Are they going to go crazy? Are they going to try to start a war? Well, you know what? So China and Russia is talking about what's going on in there. Getting themselves together. Now, let's look at something else. Newsweek, who leaked Steve Witkoff's phone call with Russia? 3 potential suspects. What's interesting about that is you already know what they're going to say. Well, it could have been the Russians. It could have been something. It was the Russians, right? It's always the Russians. Who leaked it? Well, the Russians wouldn't want it leaked. The Russians got mad because it leaked. Who did it? The same people that blew up Nord Stream. The Russians. The Russians always, they blow up their own infrastructure. They leak stuff that they wouldn't want leaked. So you have the 3. Number 1, who could it be? Former acting U.S. Director Richard Grenell and journalist Greenwald have publicly floated the possibility of someone within U.S. Intelligence being involved. Now, listen to this. Though no direct evidence has emerged. Don't you always love that? They always say, somebody made this claim without evidence, as if like the U.S. media needs evidence, right? Let's going on. Suspect number 2, that's fine. Suspect number 2 is a NATO nation. The second possible suspect would be a NATO nation seeking to shape or derail the ongoing peace negotiations. Now, watch this. Well, this is when we go to number 3. Suspect 3, Russia. The Kremlin has strongly condemned the publication of the call and denied involvement in its dissemination. Russia's deputy foreign minister accused European media of acting as agents of hybrid war against Moscow to hinder U.S.-Russia rapprochement. Now, listen to this. Now, a minute ago, they said, oh, it could have been the U.S., but there's no evidence that it was the U.S. Could have been the Europeans. Maybe. I don't know about the Europeans. However, the fact that a call between Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev, an economic advisor to the Russian president, was also intercepted, listen to this, strongly indicates Russian involvement. There we go. Possibly via a European intelligence agency proxy. So, listen to this. According to the former Bellingcat journalist, so according to Bellingcat, what we got here is a European intelligence agency was used by the Russians as a proxy to release it. Sure, it came from that's what's kind of admission. Sure, it came from the U.S. intelligence. I mean, from European intelligence. Yeah, but they were just acting as a proxy for the Russians, like they do. You know, the Russians call MI6. Hey, MI6, we need you to do something. MI6 is like, sure, what the hell, Russia? Why not? We work for you anyway. That's the level of absurdity that we went for. Right. Uh, let me see. That's it. So there we go. Let's see if we got any other news that we need to touch base on. Uh, we well, and as I said, your Max gone. Well, you know about that, and of course, all that is I think that's the Trump people who are behind this investigation trying to put pressure on Zelensky, but it ain't going to do no good because Zelensky can never sign anything. Um, Apparently, your Max said Zelensky won't cede territory to Russia. Well, you know what? Let me touch base with that. Ukrainian leader will not agree to give up any territory to Russia as long as he remains in charge of the country. Andrei Yermak has said, well, here's the reality. I agree with him. He won't. You know why? Garland Nixon will not agree to purchase a brand new 2026 Bentley sedan for $863,000. Well, I don't have $863,000. So I guess technically it would be correct to say Garland will not agree to do that. Garland will not agree to jump off a building, flap his wings, and fly across town. Sure, fair enough. I won't agree to do that because that would mean instant death. I would hit the ground, right? So the fact that Zelensky won't agree to cede territory, why? Because if he agreed, the people who would actually see who would have to cede the territory, these militias and fighters would have to say, we're out. Okay. Hey, give up this territory. You want to give up Pokrovsk or whatever the hell, Liman, the Zaporozhye. Okay, we're out. We don't want to get any more Fab 3000s dropped on us, right? So the truth of the matter is that while Zelensky could sign a document, he couldn't actually do it. He would have to count on giving orders, and the people on the ground would have to get the hell out of there and say, okay, it's theirs. We're not going to fire at the Russians. We're not going to do anything. It's over. So, yes, Zelensky will not agree to cede territory because even if he agreed to cede territory, the people in the territory who would have to abandon their positions would refuse to do it. So, what's the point of him agreeing to do it? That's the reality. He ain't going to agree to do it because even if he agrees to do it, it ain't going to do him no good, right? Let's see. Oh, this is hilarious. Here's a good one. Uh, a senior EU official has accused the U.S. of blackmail after Washington demanded that Brussels soften its digital rules in exchange for easing tariffs on steel. They said that it is that they're using blackmail. Where Howard Lutnick said that Europe should reconsider their digital regulations to be more inviting to our big countries. It's blackmail, Rivera told Politico. She also stressed that the EU's digital rulebook is not up for negotiation, should not be folded into trade discussions. Look, is it blackmail? Of course it is. Come on, guys. You're Europe. Do you use blackmail against African countries? No, you just kill and assassinate their leaders. Europe, do you use blackmail against, I don't know, Orban? Fico, against people in your own union and NATO who say, we don't want to go along with this. And you say, well, we'll cut off your money. We'll cut off this. We'll cut off that. You routinely use blackmail against people that are supposed to be a part of your group. But when the foot's on the other shoe, when the shoe's on the other foot, oh no, they're using blackmail. You know what it reminds me of? They redraw the borders of countries, and create Kosovo, all these things, right? They do that using force and then say, we're not going to accept that someone is going to change borders by force like we do. We're not going to accept the fact that the United States is using the exact same blackmail tactics against us that we use against everybody. The chickens are coming home to roost, brothers and sisters. The chickens are coming home to roost, and they are tired and they want to sleep on their perches. The chickens are coming home, and now they're going to roost in Brussels. And now you can't handle that somebody's just as big a bully as you are, and they're using the tactics that you all use. It is what it is. The EU views the legislation as a matter of sovereignty. Oh, really? Now you're into sovereignty. What do you know? We respect the rules. Whatever rules they have got for their market, it is their problem. It is their regulation and their sovereignty. Oh, do you respect the sovereignty of, I don't know, of Hungary, maybe? Slovakia? Do you respect their sovereignty? Absolutely, you do not. What goes around comes around, my dear and fluffy friends. The dispute comes against the backdrop of a US-EU trade deal agreed in July, 15% tariffs. Here's the bottom line, man. That's the game, brothers and sisters in Europe. That's the game. It is what it is. Okay, let's see. By the way, the Russians have already said, let's be honest, the Russians have already also said that, look, we can't sign a deal with Zelensky because Zelensky, under Ukrainian law, under the Ukrainian constitution, Zelensky is not a legitimate president. So it's not that we wouldn't sign or we won't or we don't want to sign with him. We want to sign a document if we get there that is enforceable under international law, that we can argue, okay, you know, this document's a strong document, we believe in it, and that the Ukrainians can't change their mind, and the Europeans and the Americans 3 years from now and say, oh, by the way, you know, you were right, Russia. That guy was not the legitimate leader under the Constitution, so we've decided it's null and void. No, they ain't gonna. They're not gonna sign that. It's not gonna happen. So legally, it makes sense. There has to be, under Ukrainian law and Ukrainian constitutional precedent, there has to be a an election, and the Ukrainians have to have a legitimate leader in order to sign any document that can be legally enforced over the course of time. Okay. Let's see. Anything else? You've got the whole Russian asset seizure plan of the Europeans, and basically what the Europeans are saying is this: if we don't steal the Russian assets, we can't go on with this war. Now, here's what you got to do. Whenever you're talking about things, you know, in law, you'll say weighing the interests, the various interests, this group versus that group, the interest of the particular legal case as opposed to the interest of people in general out here who will have to deal with this precedent, things like that nature, the interest of various groups, right? Okay, the interest of a person who wants to yell fire in a crowded theater, that person's First Amendment rights versus the interests of the people who are in the crowded theater who could be trampled and die. So the interest of the person yelling it, yes, they have First Amendment rights interests, but the people who are the group of people in that theater, they've got safety interests. And so a court now has to weigh the interests of all groups, right? So therefore, when you talk about the Russian assets, the interests weighed are the importance of keeping the war going and the Europeans having the money to keep the war going versus the economic interest, such as Euroclear in Belgium, who clearly the economic interest would be catastrophic for them, and overall in the West, the interest of people overall through the West, because you're looking at a potential economic collapse. What happens if you do this? The potential outcome could be the Saudis and people all over the world could say, ooh, we don't trust keeping our money there anymore, so we're going to take it out. And so now that whole Euroclear, the banking system, everything could collapse. And the thing about the Belgians, they, for instance, a lawsuit could be filed. They could be taken to court, not necessarily in Europe, in another part of the world. And what happens when the court rules? Yeah, you couldn't do that. And the Belgians, since it's in their country, the court rules you couldn't do it, Belgium. Therefore, you have to reimburse the money to the Russians. And the Belgians they don't have that kind of money. And the Europeans don't have it. So now the people in Belgium says, we will be required, if we're sued, to make the other party whole. And it's not our decision. We don't want to do it. You're going to tell us you take the money and we take the risk. And we even believe we're likely to lose. And when we lose, surely they'll say, pay them back the 140 billion and we won't have it. And then what? Can they seize our assets? Can they seize our country, our ports, or what? We can't do this. And the Europeans said, but we don't have any other choice. We don't care about that. The Europeans, they're like an addict. I just want my next high, man. I got to get my next high. I don't care what happens about the future. What I destroy everything around me. We just got to get my next high. We got to keep this thing going at all costs. And now it's becoming those in Europe who say, keep this conflict going at all costs, versus those who say at all costs means I'm destroyed. I ain't willing to do that. That's what you're looking at, right? Let's see. I'm looking through Russian media. Oh, here's an interesting one. Apparently there's a report that Zelensky sent somebody to the U.S. to protect him from the corruption probe, that he went and sent somebody to say, hey, don't get too close to me. So the argument, the discussion is Zelensky has held several closed-door meetings with the heads of anti-corruption agencies after his early or failed push to curb the independence. He was reportedly informed that investigators had finalized materials when Yermak and Umarov, apparently he sent a delegation to protect him and others from the probe. Well, apparently it ain't working so well. So anything else? Let me check some other stuff to see before we go. Let me check. Well, let's look on Telegram, see if there's anything showing on board. It looks like fire on board a current Kairos tanker in the Black Sea may be caused by a sea mine detonation. The Turkish sailing vessel navigating nearby found the tanker in fire. News portal said the fire's in the engine room hit by the mine. So apparently it sounds to me that the Kairos, that sounds Greek. Sounds to me like the so this was, it sounds like it's Greek. It's a tanker en route to the Russian Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. It was empty, sailing under the flag of Gambia. So apparently they were hit by a mine. So it's pretty clear that this is the EU attacking Russian, what they call a shadow fleet, you know, or attacking Russian tankers. That's all it is. It's the EU attacking Russian tankers. Anything else? Let me see. Let's see. I'm looking. Oh, let's see what Dmitry Medvedev has to say. He's always funny. The corrupt government surrounding the expired Kiev clown has crumbled. He may still be sitting in his office spewing cocaine from his nose, but he won't be the one who signs the peace treaty. The buffoon is illegitimate. The collapse of his system is inevitable. So that's the latest from this guy. He's really funny. I'm looking around. I'm not seeing anything. Yesterday, Yermak pushed back against the American president, saying under no circumstances will the Ukrainians give up territory. Well, we see how that worked out for Yermak, doesn't it? Yesterday, he said no. Today, he's charged. Anything else? I'm looking for anything that may be a news tidbit. It's like breaking news. I don't see any real breaking news. No, looks like that's it. Looks like I'm looking. Yeah, we know that Yermak's gone. That's all over the place. Here's an article. I guess it's the Washington Post or something. Trump hands Putin Ukraine's occupied territories. He hands them to him like they didn't take them. The U.S. will recognize new Russian territories for the sake of peace, according to the Telegraph, Witkoff and Kushner will tell Putin that Trump is prepared to recognize Russian control over Crimea and other new Russian territories for the sake of a peace agreement. Ukraine will reportedly not be required to do so. The plan to recognize the territory, which violates U.S. diplomatic traditions, will likely be implemented despite the concern of Ukraine's European allies, the article states. Means nothing. Means nothing. The U.S. Russian Ministry of Justice has added Human Rights Watch to the list of undesirable organizations in the Russian Federation. It's just a puppet organization for the U.S. empire. Let's see. Anything else? I think we may be at the end. I think that's it. It says Zelensky will rely on Chief of General Staff Gnatov in future U.S. delegation meetings with Yermak to exit. Zelensky says Gnatov and employees of the Foreign Ministry and Intelligence will be present for negotiations with the U.S. His name has NATO in it. That must be a good sign. I think that's it, guys. And what is this from the war with Russia has become a matter of political survival for EU leaders. That's it. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I did the best I could. I searched for anything new. I didn't find anything new. So you are updated as of 12:45 p.m. on Friday. Thank you very much. Don't forget, everybody. Everything you see, everything going across the bottom. If you are able to, that would be great. I didn't even put Zelle. You can even use Zelle. Thanks a lot, everybody. There's my PO box if you want to mail something. The most important thing you can do, as I always say, you can if you thanks especially for our Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee people, PayPal, everybody. But as I always say, if you can afford to donate and help the channel, that's great. It's wonderful. But even if you can't, that's fine too. The most important thing you can do as a member of the alternative media community, and that you surely are, the most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much. I'm out.